The mining colony of Copper Bay clung to the coastline like a barnacle on a ship's hull. Gray buildings with rusted roofs lined the muddy streets where workers trudged to and from the extraction tunnels that burrowed deep into the rocky cliffs. The ocean crashed against the shore with endless rhythm, and the air always tasted of salt and metal dust. Oliver Grant crouched behind a stack of supply crates near the eastern docks, watching the fishermen unload their morning catch. He was small for 9 years old, with brown hair that fell into his eyes and clothes that were too big and patched in a dozen places. His stomach made a quiet sound that reminded him he had not eaten since yesterday morning. The fishermen worked quickly, tossing their catch into bins that would be taken to the market. Sometimes a fish would slip and fall into the space between the dock and the boat. Sometimes it was an accident. Sometimes the older fisherman saw Oliver hiding there and made sure a fish accidentally fell just where he could reach it. Today, old Thomas was working the nets. He was one of the kind ones. Oliver waited patiently, barely breathing, until he saw a silver fish tumble from the deck and land near his hiding spot. He grabbed it quickly, nodded his thanks toward Thomas, who pretended not to notice, and ran. Oliver had been alone for 3 months since the cave collapse took his father. The mining company said it was nobody's fault, that accidents happened in dangerous work. They gave him 5 credits and told him to find relatives. Oliver had no relatives. He had the streets, his quick hands, and the kindness of strangers who remembered his father had been a good man. He ran through the narrow alleys between buildings, his bare feet splashing through puddles. The fish was a good size, enough for 2 meals if he was careful. But as he turned the corner near the old warehouse district, he heard something that made him stop cold. It was a sound like breathing, but deeper and rougher than any human or machine. It came from the caves beyond the settlement, the ones that the miners had abandoned years ago when they found nothing worth digging. Oliver knew those caves well. He sometimes slept there when the weather was bad or when the gangs were looking for easy targets. He should have kept running. Should have taken his fish home and eaten it in safety. But curiosity was stronger than sense, and Oliver crept toward the sound. The cave entrance was hidden behind collapsed scaffolding and warning signs that nobody paid attention to anymore. Oliver squeezed through a gap in the boards and let his eyes adjust to the darkness. The breathing sound was louder here, coming from deeper in the tunnel. He moved carefully, one hand on the damp cave wall for guidance. Around a bend, firelight flickered against the stone. Not the orange fire of a torch, but something bluish and strange. Oliver peered around the corner and his breath caught in his throat. She was massive, filling nearly the entire cave chamber. Her scales were silver like starlight, but they were dull and scratched. Her wings were folded against her sides, torn in places and trembling. One of her back legs was bent at a wrong angle, and dark blood had dried around a wound on her shoulder. Her head was lowered, and her golden eyes were closed in pain. Oliver had never seen a dragon before, but he knew the stories. Everyone knew about dragons. They were fierce warriors from the outer systems, raiders and conquerors who took what they wanted. The mining colony had been attacked once, 10 years ago, before Oliver was born. People still talked about it with fear and anger. But this dragon did not look fierce. She looked hurt and alone and trying very hard to stay quiet so nobody would find her. She looked the way Oliver felt most days. The dragon's eyes opened suddenly, fixing on him with sharp awareness. She tried to rise but collapsed with a sound of pain. Her mouth opened, showing teeth as long as Oliver's arm, and a low growl rumbled from her chest. Oliver should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at him to get away. But he looked at her wounded leg and her trembling wings and the way her ribs showed through her scales, and all he saw was someone who needed help. Slowly, very slowly, Oliver held up the fish he had been carrying. "You look hungry," he said, his voice small in the large cave. "I am too. But you are bigger, so you probably need it more." The dragon stared at him. Her growl faded into confused silence. She tilted her head, studying this small human who should be terrified but instead was offering food. Oliver took a few steps closer, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his chest. "I know what it is like to hide," he said quietly. "I know what it is like when everyone thinks you are something bad just because of who you are." He held out the fish. "My name is Oliver. I lost my father in the mines. I have nobody left. Maybe you have nobody too." The dragon made a sound that was softer than before, almost questioning. Her massive head lowered toward him, close enough that Oliver could feel her breath. It smelled like smoke and something wild. Up close, he could see that her silver scales had patterns like frost on a window, beautiful despite the dirt and blood. She took the fish with surprising gentleness, her teeth barely making a sound as they closed around it. She ate it in 2 bites, and Oliver saw relief in her ancient eyes. When she was done, she looked at him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She moved her good wing slightly, creating a sheltered space against her warm side, and lowered her head in invitation. Oliver understood. He walked forward and sat down in the space her wing created. The dragon was warm like a furnace, and for the first time in 3 months, Oliver felt truly safe. She wrapped her wing around him like a blanket, careful not to hurt him with her claws. "Do you have a name?" Oliver asked quietly. The dragon rumbled something that sounded like wine through metal pipes. Oliver could not repeat it exactly, but it sounded something like Rena. "Rena," he said. "That is beautiful." Rena made a softer sound, almost like a purr. She shifted slightly to make Oliver more comfortable, and he leaned against her scaled shoulder. Outside the cave, the colony continued its daily routine, unaware that inside a forgotten tunnel, 2 lost souls had found each other. Oliver did not know that this moment would change everything. He did not know that his simple act of sharing food would start a friendship that would challenge everything the colony believed about dragons. He did not know that within weeks, he and Rena would face dangers that would test their bond and prove that family had nothing to do with species or blood. All he knew was that for the first time since his father died, he was not alone. And beside him, Rena felt the same. She had been exiled from her kind for refusing to raid innocent settlements. She had been wounded by her own people for choosing mercy over violence. She had expected to die alone in this cold cave. Instead, she had found a small human with a kind heart and brave spirit. A child who looked past her fearsome appearance and saw someone who needed help. It was more than she deserved, and she would protect this boy with everything she had left. They stayed together in the quiet cave while the sun moved across the sky outside. 2 outcasts from different worlds, no longer alone. The beginning of something neither of them could have imagined. The beginning of hope. 2 weeks had passed since Oliver found Rena in the cave, and his life had transformed in ways he never imagined. Every morning before dawn, he would sneak out of the abandoned storage room where he slept and make his way to the hidden cave. He brought whatever food he could gather, scraps from the market, fish from the docks, sometimes just bread that was too stale for the bakery to sell. Rena was healing slowly. Her leg was still weak, but she could stand now. The wound on her shoulder had closed, though it left a scar across her silver scales. She was still too weak to fly, but her strength was returning day by day. They had developed a way of communicating that went beyond words. Rena would make sounds and gestures, and Oliver learned to understand her meanings. She taught him simple dragon words, and he taught her human language. They were building a bridge between their worlds, one careful step at a time. But keeping a dragon hidden in a mining colony was becoming harder. The cave was deep enough that her presence went unnoticed, but Oliver needed more food than he could scavenge alone. He had started taking small jobs at the docks, loading cargo and cleaning boats for a few credits. The work was hard, but it meant he could buy proper food instead of just taking scraps. That was how he met Mira. She was a young woman, maybe 20 years old, with dark skin and gentle hands that spoke of someone who knew how to heal. She ran a small medical tent near the workers' district, treating injuries for those who could not afford the colony's official hospital. Oliver had cut his hand on a piece of broken metal while working, and someone directed him to her tent. Mira cleaned and bandaged his hand with practiced efficiency, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. "You are working too hard for a boy your age," she said quietly. "And eating too little. I can see it in your face." "I am fine," Oliver said quickly. "I just need to work more." "Why?" "Most orphans in this colony barely work at all. They survive on charity and odd jobs." She studied him carefully. "You are working like someone who has another mouth to feed." Oliver's heart jumped. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but Mira was too observant. She leaned closer and spoke in a whisper that only he could hear. "I saw you carrying food toward the old caves 3 days ago. Big portions for such a small boy." Oliver stood up quickly, ready to run, but Myra's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Her grip was gentle but firm. "I am not going to tell anyone," she said softly. "But whatever you are doing, you need to be careful. The mine overseer, Master Thane, has been asking questions about missing supplies. If he catches you stealing, even scraps, he will have you thrown in detention." "I am not stealing," Oliver said defensively. "I work for everything I take." "I believe you." Mira released his shoulder and went to a cabinet in the corner of her tent. She pulled out a cloth bag and filled it with dried meat, bread, and fruit. "Here. This is extra from my own supplies. Consider it payment for keeping me company while I work." Oliver stared at the bag. It was more food than he usually gathered in 3 days. "Why are you helping me?" Mira smiled sadly. "Because I know what it is like to care for someone when you have barely enough for yourself. My little brother was sick for 2 years before he died. I would have done anything to keep him fed and safe." She pressed the bag into Oliver's hands. "Whatever you are protecting, I hope it is worth it." Oliver clutched the bag tightly. "It is. Thank you." He ran back to the cave as fast as he could, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Rena was waiting for him, and when she saw the amount of food he brought, her eyes widened with surprise. Oliver told her about Mira, about the kindness of a stranger who asked no questions. Rena listened carefully, then spoke in her rough, accented human words. "Good human. Like you. Rare." "Not that rare," Oliver said, smiling. "There are good people here. They just need a reason to show it." Over the next week, Oliver continued his work at the docks. He had become known as a reliable worker despite his age, and Captain Wade, the head of port security, had started giving him regular jobs. Wade was a stern man with gray hair and a scarred face, but he was fair. He paid Oliver proper wages and never tried to cheat him. One afternoon, while Oliver was helping unload a cargo ship, a commotion broke out at the far end of the dock. A woman in expensive clothes was arguing with several dock workers. Her voice carried across the water, sharp with authority and frustration. "I need that shipment delivered to the northern mines by tomorrow," she was saying. "I will pay double the usual rate." "Ma'am, with respect, the northern route goes through the Red Cliffs," one of the workers replied. "The Crimson Brotherhood has been raiding that area for weeks. Nobody wants to risk it." The woman, who Oliver learned was Helena Cross, a wealthy merchant who supplied equipment to the mines, looked around desperately. Her eyes landed on Captain Wade. "You have security personnel. Can you not provide an escort?" Wade shook his head. "My people protect the port, not cargo routes. You would need to hire private security, and that costs more than double pay." Helena looked frustrated and worried. Oliver knew why. The northern mines were struggling, and without proper equipment, they would have to shut down. That meant dozens of workers would lose their jobs. His father had worked in those mines before the accident. Oliver found himself speaking before he thought it through. "I could help." Everyone turned to look at him. Helena raised an eyebrow. You are a child. I know the Red Cliffs, Oliver said, which was true. He had explored those areas many times. I know paths that avoid the main roads where the Brotherhood operates. And I could scout ahead to make sure the route is clear. Absolutely not, Wade said firmly. Those raiders are dangerous. I am not sending a boy into that situation. But Helena was considering it. What would you want in return? Food, Oliver said immediately. Enough supplies for 2 people for a month. And 20 credits. Helena studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Done. But you will not go alone. I will hire 2 guards as well. You guide, they protect. Wade looked unhappy but said nothing more. The deal was made. That evening, Oliver told Rena about the arrangement. She listened with growing concern, her tail swishing with agitation. Dangerous. You too small. I need the food and credits, Oliver explained. And I know those cliffs better than anyone. I will be safe. Rena growled softly, a sound that Oliver had learned meant she was worried. She lowered her head until her golden eyes were level with his. I come. Protect. You are still healing, Oliver protested. And if people see you, they will panic. I follow. Not seen. Keep you safe. Her tone left no room for argument. Despite her size, Rena could move with surprising stealth when needed. She would shadow the cargo transport from a distance, ready to help if danger came. Oliver wanted to argue, but he knew that stubborn look in Rena's eyes. Dragons were protective of those they considered family. Okay. But stay hidden unless there is real trouble. The next morning, the cargo transport set out at dawn. Helena had hired 2 guards, both experienced fighters with weapons and armor. Oliver led the way on foot, guiding the hover truck through narrow paths that wound around the red cliffs instead of through them. Rena followed from high above, gliding silently between the rock formations. Oliver occasionally caught glimpses of silver scales in the morning light, but she stayed well hidden from the others. They made good progress for the first few hours. The path Oliver chose was longer but safer, avoiding the main routes where the Crimson Brotherhood typically operated. The guards were impressed with his knowledge of the terrain, and Helena, who had insisted on coming along to oversee her valuable cargo, seemed pleased. But as they rounded a particularly steep cliff face, Oliver saw something that made his blood run cold. Smoke rising from the northern mines in the distance. Not the normal smoke from forges and equipment, but thick black smoke that spoke of fire and destruction. Something is wrong, Oliver said, pointing. The guards saw it too. They picked up speed, racing toward the mines. As they got closer, they could hear sounds of fighting, screams, and the crash of metal on metal. The Crimson Brotherhood had not been raiding the roads. They had gone straight to the source, attacking the mines themselves. The hover truck skidded to a stop at the edge of the mining settlement. Buildings were burning. Workers were running in panic. A group of raiders, maybe 20 strong, were loading stolen equipment onto their own vehicles. They wore red bandanas and carried weapons that gleamed in the firelight. We need to get the security forces from the main colony, one of the guards said, reaching for his communicator. That will take an hour, Helena said, her voice tight with fear. These people do not have an hour. Oliver looked up at the cliffs where Rena was hidden. He could see her silver form perched on a high ledge, watching. She met his eyes, and in that moment, they understood each other perfectly. Oliver turned to Helena and the guards. I can stop them. But you have to trust me. How? Wade's guard asked. You are one boy. I am not alone, Oliver said simply. He cupped his hands around his mouth and called out in the dragon language Rena had taught him. Rena, come. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a shadow fell over the entire settlement as Rena launched herself from the cliff face. She spread her wings wide, and even though they were still torn and healing, they were magnificent. The sun caught her silver scales and made her look like a creature of legend descending from the sky. She landed between the raiders and the fleeing workers with a crash that shook the ground. Her roar split the air, a sound of fury and protection that echoed off the cliff walls. The Crimson Brotherhood froze. Their leader, a large man with scars covering his arms, stared at Rena with pure terror. "Dragon," he whispered. Rena took a step forward, her golden eyes blazing. She spoke in human language, each word deliberate and clear. "You leave. Now. Or burn." The raiders did not need to be told twice. They abandoned their stolen goods and ran for their vehicles, racing away down the mountain road as fast as their engines could carry them. The workers who had been fleeing stopped and stared. Helena and the guards stood frozen in shock. The whole settlement had gone silent except for the crackling of flames. Oliver walked forward and stood beside Rena, placing his small hand on her leg. "It is okay," he called out to the watching crowd. "She is with me. She is a friend." An elderly miner stepped forward cautiously. Oliver recognized him as someone who had worked with his father. "The boy speaks truth. This dragon is not here to harm us." "I protect," Rena said, her voice carrying across the settlement. "I protect him. I protect you. No harm." The miner looked at Oliver, then at Rena, then back at Oliver. Slowly, he nodded. "Your father was a good man, Oliver Grant. He saved my life once in a cave collapse. If you trust this dragon, then maybe we can too." One by one, the other workers emerged from their hiding places. They looked at Rena with fear and wonder, but also with growing understanding. This dragon had just saved them from raiders who would have destroyed their livelihoods and possibly killed them. Helena walked up to Oliver. Her expression a mix of awe and confusion. "How long have you been hiding a dragon?" 2 weeks, Oliver admitted. She was hurt and alone. "I have been taking care of her." "Taking care of her," Helena repeated, shaking her head in disbelief. "A 9-year-old boy, taking care of a dragon." "We take care of each other," Oliver corrected. "That is what friends do." Captain Wade's guard was speaking rapidly into his communicator, no doubt reporting what had happened. Oliver knew that soon the whole colony would know about Rena. There would be questions, maybe fear, possibly demands that she leave. But looking at the faces of the miners who were already starting to put out the fires and assess the damage, Oliver saw something else. He saw gratitude. He saw people who had been saved by the very creature they had been taught to fear. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Not just for him and Rena, but for everyone who believed that dragons and humans could never be anything but enemies. Rena lowered her head and nuzzled Oliver gently, a gesture of affection that made several watching miners smile despite themselves. They could see the bond between boy and dragon, and it was impossible to fear something that showed such obvious love. "Come on," Oliver said to Rena. "Let us help them rebuild." And together, they walked into the settlement to help the people who were learning that the stories they had been told were not always true. News of the dragon at the northern mine spread through Copper Bay like wildfire. By the time Oliver and Rena returned to the main colony 2 days later, everyone knew the story. A 9-year-old orphan boy and an exiled dragon had saved a mining settlement from raiders. It was the kind of tale that people wanted to believe, but many were still afraid. Governor Parnell, the colonial administrator, called an emergency meeting at the town hall. Oliver was summoned, and Rena came with him. They walked through streets where people stopped to stare, some with wonder, many with fear. Children hid behind their parents. Guards kept their hands on their weapons, though they did not draw them. The town hall was packed with colonists, all wanting to see the dragon for themselves. Rena had to wait outside because she was too large to fit through the doors. She curled herself near the entrance, patient and calm, while Oliver went inside. Governor Parnell was a thin man with tired eyes and gray hair. He sat at a large table with the Colony Council, 5 other officials who helped run Copper Bay. Master Thane, the mine overseer, was among them, his expression sour and disapproving. "Oliver Grant," Parnell began, his voice formal. "You have been harboring a dragon within colony territory without permission. This is a serious violation of our security protocols." "She was hurt and alone," Oliver said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I was just trying to help." "Helping is admirable," Parnell said. "But dragons are dangerous. Their kind has raided human settlements for generations. We have laws about unauthorized alien presence for good reason." Master Thane leaned forward, his voice harsh. "The creature should be expelled immediately. We cannot risk having a predator living among us. Today she saved miners, but tomorrow she might decide they look like food." Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. But then Mira stood up from where she had been sitting in the audience. "Governor, if I may speak?" Parnell nodded. "Healer Mira, you have the floor." "I have been treating colonists for 3 years," Mira said clearly. "In that time, I have seen what real danger looks like. The Crimson Brotherhood has killed 5 people and injured dozens in their raids. That dragon stopped them with a single appearance. She did not kill anyone. She did not even hurt them. She just scared them away." She paused. "That is not the action of a mindless predator. That is the action of someone choosing mercy." Helena Cross stood next. "I was there at the northern mines. I saw what happened. That dragon, Rena, could have incinerated those raiders. Instead, she gave them a chance to run. And afterward, she helped the miners put out fires and move debris. I watched her carefully lift a collapsed beam that had trapped a man underneath. Her claws are as long as my forearm, but she did not leave a single scratch on him." Captain Wade rose to his feet. "I have spent 20 years in security work. I know dangerous when I see it. What I saw was not dangerous. What I saw was a dragon protecting a child who showed her kindness. If we punish that, if we exile her for choosing to help instead of harm, then we are telling every being in this galaxy that mercy is weakness." The crowd was divided now. Some nodded in agreement. Others still looked fearful and uncertain. Governor Parnell raised his hand for silence. "This is an unprecedented situation. We need to consider all perspectives." He looked at Oliver. "Tell me honestly, boy. Can you control this dragon? If she becomes angry or hungry, can you stop her from harming people?" "I do not control her," Oliver said firmly. "She is not a pet or a tool. She is my friend. And friends do not hurt each other or the people they care about." "Friendship," Master Thane scoffed. "A child's fantasy. Dragons do not form friendships with humans." "Then explain what I saw," Helena challenged. "Explain why a dragon would risk her own safety to save human miners. Explain why she follows a 9-year-old boy's guidance instead of just taking what she wants." Before anyone could respond, a deep voice spoke from outside the hall. Rena had moved closer to the entrance, and her words carried through the open doors. "I speak for myself." The hall fell absolutely silent. Everyone turned toward the entrance where Rena's large head appeared, her golden eyes reflecting the lamplight. "I am Rena of the Silver Flight," she said, her human words careful but clear. "I was exiled by my own people because I refused to raid peaceful settlements. I chose honor over violence, and they called me weak. They called me traitor." She paused. "I came to this world to die alone. Expected nothing. Wanted nothing. Then small human found me. Brought food when he had none. Stayed when he should run. Showed kindness when I deserved none." The hall remained utterly quiet. People listened with rapt attention. Oliver Grant saved my life, Rena continued. Not with weapons or force. With compassion. With choice to see me as person, not monster. I swear on my ancestors' fire, I will never harm this colony. I will protect it as I protect him. This is my oath. Governor Parnell stared at the dragon with wide eyes. You are asking us to trust you based on one boy's kindness? No, Rena said. I ask you trust based on my actions. Judge me not by what my kind has done, but by what I choose to do. A woman in the crowd stood up. Oliver recognized her as the mother of one of the miners who had been trapped under debris at the northern settlement. My husband was the man trapped under that beam. He said the dragon was gentle as a mother with her child when she freed him. He said she even checked to make sure he could breathe before she moved on to help others. Her voice cracked with emotion. My husband is alive because of her. I vote to let her stay. More people began to stand. The elderly miner who had spoken to Oliver at the northern settlement stood. I worked with Oliver's father for 10 years. He taught his son to judge beings by their character, not their species. I say we honor that lesson. Let the dragon stay. One by one, people stood and voiced their support. Not everyone, but enough. The tide was turning. Governor Parnell looked at his council members. They spoke in quiet voices, debating. Finally, he turned back to the crowd. This is not a decision I can make lightly. We need official protocols. He looked at Rena. Would you submit to a probationary period? 6 months where you would work with colony security to prove your intentions? Yes, Rena said immediately. I work. I prove. I stay. And you, Oliver, Parnell addressed the boy. You understand you would be responsible for her? If she causes harm, intentional or not, you would bear the consequences? Oliver walked to the entrance and placed his hand on Rena's scaled leg. We are responsible for each other. That is what family means. Master Thane started to protest, but Parnell silenced him with a gesture. Then by the authority granted to me as colonial governor, I approve a 6-month probationary residency for Rena of the Silver Flight. She will work with Captain Wade's security team and help protect the colony from external threats. In return, she will be granted legal residency and protection under colonial law. He looked at the crowd. Are there any formal objections? The hall was silent except for Master Thane's disapproving grunt. Then it is decided, Parnell declared. Let the record show that today, Copper Bay Colony became the first human settlement to officially recognize a dragon as a resident and citizen. The hall erupted in mixed reactions, cheers and worried murmurs blending together. But the decision was made. Over the next 6 months, Rena proved herself beyond any doubt. She worked with Captain Wade's security team, patrolling the mining routes and keeping raiders away. Her mere presence was enough to deter most threats. The Crimson Brotherhood never returned, and other gangs gave Copper Bay a wide berth. But Rena did more than just security work. She helped in the mines, using her strength to move heavy equipment and her fire to help with metalwork. She assisted during a storm by using her body to shelter workers who were caught outside. She even allowed the colony's children to approach her, patient and gentle as they touched her scales with wonder. Oliver continued to live with her in a specially built shelter near the edge of town. Helena Cross had funded its construction, saying it was the least she could do. Mira visited often, bringing medical supplies and becoming a close friend to both of them. On the day Rena's probation officially ended, Governor Parnell held a ceremony in the town square. The whole colony gathered, and this time the crowd was smiling. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to get a better view. 6 months ago, we made a choice, Parnell said. We chose to give trust a chance. We chose to believe that beings could change, that old hatreds did not have to define new relationships. He looked at Rena and Oliver standing together. Today, I am proud to announce that Rena of the Silver Flight is now a full citizen of Copper Bay Colony, with all rights and protections that entails." The crowd cheered. Children threw flower petals. Rena's eyes gleamed with emotion she could barely contain. But the ceremony was interrupted by the arrival of a spacecraft, sleek and silver, bearing markings that Rena recognized immediately. Her entire body went rigid. "Dragon Council," she whispered. The ship landed in the square, and a ramp descended. 3 dragons emerged, all wearing formal armor. They were magnificent and terrifying, their scales gleaming with authority. The lead dragon, a male with dark blue scales and eyes like ice, approached. Rena of the Silver Flight, he spoke in the dragon language. "We heard rumors of an exile living among humans. We came to see if it was true." Rena lifted her head high, facing her own kind with dignity. She responded in the dragon tongue, and though Oliver could not understand all the words, he heard defiance and pride in her voice. The blue dragon looked at Oliver, at the crowd, at the colony that had gathered protectively around Rena. He spoke again, and this time in human language. "You were exiled for refusing to follow our ways. We expected you to die alone, forgotten. Instead, you built something we thought impossible. These people are my family," Rena said firmly. "This colony is my home. I will not leave it." The blue dragon studied her for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he bowed his head slightly. "We did not come to take you away. We came to learn." He looked at Governor Parnell. "The Dragon Council wishes to establish formal relations with this colony. To learn how humans and dragons can coexist. Rena has proven it is possible. Perhaps others can follow her example." Parnell, recovering from his shock, stepped forward. Copper Bay would be honored to be part of such an endeavor. The blue dragon nodded. "Then let this place be remembered as where old hatreds ended and new alliances began." He looked back at Rena. "You were right to choose mercy. We were wrong to exile you. The Council recognizes this now." Rena's eyes filled with tears. After months of believing her own kind had abandoned her forever, to hear those words was more than she had ever hoped for. The ceremony continued, but now it was bigger than just Rena's citizenship. It was the beginning of something historic. The first step toward peace between dragons and humans, started by an orphaned boy who shared his food and an exiled dragon who chose kindness over violence. That evening, as the celebrations wound down, Oliver and Rena sat together on a hill overlooking the colony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Ships came and went from the docks below, and smoke rose from happy cooking fires. "We did it," Oliver said quietly. "We changed things." "You changed things," Rena corrected gently. "Small boy with kind heart changed everything." "We changed things together," Oliver insisted. "That is what partners do." Rena wrapped her wing around him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their home come alive with lights as night fell. Below them, human and dragon diplomats were beginning conversations that would reshape the galaxy. But up here, it was just a boy and his dragon, a family built not from blood but from choice and love and the simple act of sharing a fish on a rainy day. They had been lost and alone, both of them. Now they had found home. Not because someone gave it to them, but because they built it together, one act of kindness at a time. And in the years to come, historians would mark this as the moment when everything changed. When humans and dragons learned that the strongest bonds are not forged in battle, but in compassion. When an orphaned boy and a forgotten dragon proved that anyone, no matter how small or how exiled, could change the world. Their story became legend, told across the galaxy as proof that hope and kindness could overcome even the deepest divides. And it all started with one simple choice to share food with.